Hey guys, in this week's video, I built a planer cart. And I don't know if anybody really cares about this stuff anymore, but I certainly do. It's made from entirely reclaimed materials. But the cool thing about this planer cart is that it's under wing. So it fits snugly right underneath my table saw. This is a sponsored video by Milescraft. They sent me a whole bunch of tools to get the job done on this one, and I really appreciate it, so big thanks to Milescraft. Full build plans will be available through Milescraft in the description below. So check that out. Again, thanks for watching. Check it out. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. When working with full-length 2x4s, I like to use my Ryoba to crosscut into rough pieces. I can then trim to exact length using the table saw crosscut sled later on. I built this quick and dirty jointing jig using MDF, a section of 2x4, and 2 toggle clamps. It's great for scoring up one edge. I can now run my jointed edge against the table saw fence to get 2 perfectly parallel edges. The Milescraft push stick has a rubber edge and a back cleat that really helps control the workpiece as it's pushed through the saw. I'm really just skip planing these parts to clean them up, as their thickness isn't really critical to the project, but I wanted to clean them up. And to minimize planer snipe, I feed the pieces one after the other without a break. As mentioned earlier, I use my table saw crosscut sled with a stop block to bring my frame parts to final length. This ensures accuracy and repeatability. Okay, so here we are. This is a dry run mock-up of how the planer stand is going to look, and the joinery being used in this one is dowels. They sent me 2 doweling jigs. They sent me the Joint Pro, and they sent me the dowel jig kit. And for this project, I'm going to use the dowel jig kit, and they also sent me a whole bunch of dowels, so that's what I'm going to do for this one. I made some evenly spaced marks on a jig. I then eyeball transferred those marks to my workpiece. Then I used a small adjustable square to extend the marks into full lines. Once I set the fence to the desired distance, I then transferred the center line provided on the doweling jig to my workpiece. This let me create crosshairs visible within the jig's bushing, allowing me to perfectly line up the holes. This is my method and is not in the instructions, but it worked for me. I did the exact same thing on the mating workpiece, and they matched up perfectly. I find that it's important to mark your mating pieces with either a letter or a number to ensure that all parts go together correctly. I always do a dry test fit with each joint, just in case any adjustment is necessary. Okay, so I've got my 2 frames. All the joinery is done for it as far as the dowels. I'm just going to glue it up. But as I glue it up, as I pull up my clamps here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the jig. And I know that there were doweling centers included in the jig, but I found it much easier just to accurately transfer the lines. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting some glue deep inside the holes, and then the dowels are fluted and chamfered, so they push the glue up. And that way you make sure that your dowels are perfectly seated every time and that all the squeeze out gets squozen out. Perfect. And then obviously I put in some glue all the way around as well. Oh, the other thing that's super important, or that I found super important, was to make sure that you're working with like a mechanical pencil rather than like those construction pencils that you get from Home Depot or whatever, just because I found I needed more accuracy than one of those big carpenter pencils was able to give me. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue up, but at the same time I'm also going to make sure I'm going to be checking for square. And I'll adjust anything that needs to be adjusted. Okay, so that's one set. Ugh. And I'll do the same thing with the other. I waited 24 hours and took these two main frames out of the clamps. I then repeated the process of drilling for dowels as previously shown. The only thing I wanted to point out here is that these cross sections overlap both a rail and a stile. This is done to bolster and strengthen the entire substructure. I'm not sure if it comes across, but I was really stressed out during the glue up, as the open time of yellow glue is pretty short. This is another reason why marking your pieces makes this process go along more smoothly. Closing up the cart with plywood sides makes it feel more complete, but it also strengthens it. I chose to rabbet the thickness of the plywood into the sides and back of the cart. This will give me the maximum amount of interior volume in case I decide to make a drawer in the future. Using a bearing-guided router bit means that the rabbets will have rounded corners that need to be squared up in order for the plywood sides to seat correctly. That's quickly done with a sharp chisel and a mallet. I squared up some scrap reclaimed plywood using my table saw and cut it to the width of the rabbeted openings. The Miles Craft grabber with its sticky bottom makes working with sheet goods feel much safer. I then used my miter gauge to cross-cut the rabbeted openings length. I put in some glue and air nailed them in place. Off camera. Sorry guys. I used washers when screwing on these casters as the holes were larger than the width of my panhead screws. Next, I cut to size this reclaimed pre-finished desktop to use as the top of the cart. Again, the grabber makes these types of cuts much safer by allowing me to apply maximum pressure against the table saw fin. I pre-drilled and countersunk my screws, as I did not want to split or mar the top of this beautiful soft maple that would be hiding under my planer. This project was a ton of fun to build. Huge thanks to Miles Craft for their support. Hit me up in the comments and let me know what you think of the project.